Salut, my name is Ben from FILMABENT.com, and today I want to show you how you can create film emulations in Premiere Pro to make your digital video look and feel a bit more like film. So first of all, usually I would recommend to do this in DaVinci Resolve, since DaVinci is just the better program for color grading and creating looks. But I find myself trapped in this Adobe space since I'm working a lot with After Effects and different Adobe programs. And I just wanted to know how you can create the same kind of look in Premiere Pro. So let's go into Premiere with our footage right here that we're gonna work with. And the first step is going to be to duplicate this layer twice. So first of all, we're going to start on our top layer. We're going to add Sinion Converter, choose Lock to Linear, drag this down all the way to 0 and bump this up to 1000. Now it should look like this. Then we're going to head over into our color space and go to Curves. Drag this all the way down and create a little point right here. And now you can pull this point all the way up again. So as you can see, now we selected all the highlights of the image, which is gonna help us with creating this red halation that film has. You could also use Luma key to select all the highlights, but I actually find this way to work best. So I just wanted to show you the way that I'm usually taking to create the look that I'm creating for my videos. So for our next step, we're gonna go ahead and add channel blur to our top layer. This is actually the effect that's gonna create the red halation that we want. And you achieve that by just bumping up the red blurriness all the way up to almost 200, I would say. And then you're gonna go to opacity, put your blend mode on screen. And now you can already see the halation and all the highlights in our image. So this for me is actually the most important step in terms of creating images that look like film, because you just don't have this red halation in all your digital images that your camera can produce. And I find it absolutely beautiful, and I use it on almost all of my films that I create. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and color grade our bottom layer. Make sure to turn off the middle layer first. And for this image, I'm going to go ahead and make it a bit more blue and add some saturation. This is already looking pretty good. I'm going to pull out some whites and I'm going to put in some contrast. Now we're gonna head to the curve section. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna raise the blacks just by a little bit. And now I'm gonna create an S curve, and I'm also gonna raise the mids just by a bit. So what I did for our color is I pushed the shadows into the tealish blue area and the midtones and the highlights into the reds. And then I also raised the highlights and the midtones as well as lower the shadows. This is just the look that I wanted for the sequence that you saw at the beginning of the video. You can obviously also use other color grades, other Luts. I would just make sure that they're kind of in the same color space as film would be. So this already looks pretty good, I would say. Now we're gonna go ahead and copy our lumetric color and add it to our middle layer. So our middle layer is only there to soften our entire image. As you might know, images from film are way more soft than the images that our digital and modern cameras produce today. So we're going to recreate or try to recreate this softness with a Gaussian blur on the middle layer. So let's add it to our middle layer, and usually I just bump it up to about 50. And as you can see, our image is way too soft right now, but we're going to change that by dropping our opacity to about 30% and changing the blending mode to screen. So now we created the halation effect, we color graded our image, and then we softened it. What's left to do now is to add some film characteristics. And we're going to do that with film grain. So right now I'm going to use a 35mm grain overlay. You can also use a 16mm grain overlay. It just comes down to your preference. I'm also, by the way, going to put a download link to all the assets that I'm using in the video down below into the description, so you can recreate the look that I'm going for right now. So we're going to go ahead and drop this into our timeline. I'm going to shorten it to fit our little sequence, and we need to adjust the scale. And usually these overlays for grain are made to be used in a hard light blend mode. Some are different, you just have to check for which one you have. And I'm also gonna go ahead and lower the opacity of the grain. And now this already looks like a very film-like image, to me at least. So at this point, the last thing that I like to do is to add a little flicker effect. Because if you look at film, it always flickers a bit in brightness, it always changes a bit in brightness, and it's a very specific characteristic of film that I like to add onto my digital video. To create this effect, I'm only using a flicker overlay that you can also find in the download folder down below. So I'm just going to drop it into our timeline. I'm going to shorten it as well, and we're going to have to scale it up to fit our 4K video file. And now you're just changing the blend mode to overlay, and I usually drop the opacity to about 60%. So now if you play back our video, you will see a very subtle flicker, which is almost not noticeable, but I just like to bring our digital video as close to film as possible to match the characteristics as good as we can. So the last thing that you can do is add like a subtle dust overlay onto our image, and we're gonna go ahead and scale this up to 200%, change this to screen, and change the opacity as well. So now you have like these little white dust points on your image. So in the end, I also like to use like a window overlay, a film window overlay, which cuts off the borders of the image. But to do that, I would recommend that you already shoot your footage with this window overlay in mind. Otherwise, you're going to cut off parts of the image that might be interesting or important to your story. But just for the sake of the video, I'm going to add a film window overlay, and all you have to do is scale it to match your video file. And usually I'm softening it just a little bit because it's a bit too sharp for my taste. I'm gonna add a Gaussian blur, and as you can see, you can kind of see the image behind the frame, so we're gonna have to scale it up just a little bit. And voila, you're done. So this is it. This, in my opinion, is the best way to make digital video look like film in Premiere Pro. If you want to see a video how to do this in DaVinci Resolve, just comment down below and I might make a video on that as well. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments as well and I will try to answer them. See you in the next video.